What would you do if your wedding ended with a note instead of vows? No explanation, no argument, just silence, lawyers, and a truth buried too deep to ignore. This channel is where perfect families crack, where love collides with betrayal, and where charm hides carefully planned deception. Here, you'll hear stories where parents choose protection over emotion, where husbands live double lives behind flawless smiles, and where silence becomes the most devastating form of revenge. Every story pulls you into raw moments, notes left behind, secrets exposed, and truths that surface exactly when they're meant to. These aren't fairy tales. They're emotional reckonings, told from the inside, where patience outsmarts manipulation and betrayal always leaves a trail. If you believe the quietest choices sometimes deliver the loudest consequences, you're in the right place. The note was waiting on the counter where wedding invitations had been stacked the night before. Same handwriting that once signed birthday cards and loan approvals, now reduced to a single sentence that erased an entire future. The wedding was canceled. No reasons, no discussion, only a warning about a lawyer and what would come next. Years of trust were replaced by ink that felt heavier than any spoken argument. The silence that followed hurt more than shouting ever could. Phones stayed untouched, questions circled endlessly but never escaped the room. A perfect family image, carefully polished for neighbors, relatives, and social media, cracked in one quiet morning. That crack revealed something ugly underneath, something that had been hidden for far too long. The man everyone believed to be a devoted husband reacted first. Calls came one after another, voice messages swinging wildly between concern and anger. Love sounded rehearsed, panic felt real. Every word carried the fear of exposure rather than heartbreak. That was the moment doubt turned into certainty. Memories began rearranging themselves. Late nights blamed on work, financial decisions explained away with charm, a second phone that was always for emergencies, conversations that stopped when footsteps entered the room. None of it seemed dangerous before. Now it all connected like evidence laid out in court. The parents had never been cruel. Protective, yes. Quiet, always. That quiet now made sense. They hadn't acted on emotion, but on proof. Bank records, messages, names that should have never appeared. A relationship running parallel to the marriage, tied disturbingly close to the family circle. The wedding wasn't canceled out of anger. It was stopped to prevent a legal and emotional disaster already unfolding. The husband arrived later, confidence stripped away, eyes scanning for sympathy that wasn't there. The truth didn't need to be shouted. It sat calmly between everyone present, undeniable and complete. Every lie he told collapsed under its own weight. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself, but how easily love had been used as camouflage. Some endings don't come with arguments. They arrive with silence sharp enough to cut everything clean. Law entered the family before truth ever did. It arrived quietly, dressed in paperwork and sealed envelopes, while love stood frozen, unsure whether it was still welcome. The parents didn't explain their choice. They didn't soften it. They simply moved forward as if this moment had been rehearsed long before the engagement ring ever appeared. That hurt more than the canceled wedding. It felt like being placed on the wrong side of a locked door, hearing voices decide a future without asking permission. Loyalty was assumed, not discussed. Protection came wrapped in legal language instead of comfort, and the message was clear. Emotions could no longer be trusted. At first, it felt like betrayal coming from the wrong direction. Why a lawyer? Why now? Why so prepared? But answers revealed themselves slowly, in fragments that became impossible to ignore. Files stacked neatly in a study drawer, dates highlighted, transactions traced back months, no, years. The parents hadn't acted suddenly. They had been watching, waiting, verifying. The man meant to be a husband had never fooled them the way he fooled everyone else. Charm raised suspicion. Generosity felt calculated. Too many coincidences followed wherever he went. A background check uncovered debts hidden behind borrowed confidence. Shell accounts tied to names that weren't strangers at all, but people already sitting at family tables during holidays. What looked like coldness was restraint. What sounded like silence was strategy. Love hadn't been abandoned, it had been guarded. When the truth surfaced, it came without theatrics. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, just facts laid out with precision. A secret relationship overlapping the engagement. Money diverted for a future that didn't include the marriage at all. Plans made assuming legal protection would come from the very vows he pretended to honor. That was when the shift happened. Anger no longer aimed at the parents. It settled firmly where it belonged. They had chosen law because love alone wouldn't stop what was coming. They had chosen preparation over denial, evidence over hope. The husband sensed it too. Confidence cracked the moment he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an intervention, timed perfectly to leave no escape. Blood ties didn't break that day. They tightened. And betrayal learned the hard way that it had been outnumbered from the start. The charm had always been effortless. Smiles delivered at the right moments, generosity displayed when an audience was watching. Promises wrapped so convincingly they felt solid. Everyone believed in the version of the man he chose to present. Everyone except those who noticed the cracks forming just beneath the surface. The double life didn't begin suddenly. It grew quietly, fed by lies small enough to ignore at first. A business deal that never made sense, money that disappeared and reappeared with rehearsed explanations, calls answered in another room, messages deleted before questions could form. Trust blurred reality until warning signs felt like imagination. Then the names started surfacing. One stood out sharply, painfully familiar. A woman who didn't come from nowhere, but from close enough to feel intentional. Family gatherings, shared holidays, laughter exchanged across tables while secrets sat comfortably between them. The realization settled slowly, heavy and humiliating, that proximity had been part of the thrill. Financial records told the story more clearly than words ever could. Accounts opened under false pretenses, funds moved strategically, preparing for an exit that didn't include honesty or commitment. Love had been used as leverage, marriage as insurance. Every promise masked an escape plan already in motion. Manipulation wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. Sympathy manufactured when suspicion arose, apologies offered without substance. A talent for turning doubt into guilt, making questions feel like betrayal rather than survival. That was the most dangerous part, not the lies themselves, but how convincingly truth had been redirected. The confrontation never became dramatic. It didn't need to. The evidence spoke calmly, efficiently, leaving no room for denial. The charm vanished instantly, replaced by a hollow stare that betrayed fear rather than remorse. Exposure stripped him of the only power he ever held, control over the narrative. The other woman disappeared just as quietly as she entered, retreating back into denial when secrecy was no longer possible. The double life collapsed under the weight of daylight. No shouting followed, no begging mattered. Some truths arrived too complete to argue with. What remained was clarity, not relief, not closure, just understanding. Love hadn't been failed, it had been exploited. Trust hadn't been misplaced accidentally, it had been targeted deliberately. The man who believed deception could live forever learned the hard way that secrets don't survive when everyone finally stops protecting them. Silence was the hardest choice, and also the most powerful one. Every instinct begged to argue, to demand explanations, to tear into the lies before they could be rearranged into something believable. None of that happened. Phones stayed unanswered. Messages were read once and left without reply. Panic grew louder on the other end while calm settled firmly on this side. He didn't understand that silence wasn't confusion, it was permission. Within hours, he began unraveling on his own. Calls shifted from confident reassurance to frantic justification. Stories contradicted each other. Names slipped out that were never supposed to be spoken. Each voicemail exposed another crack, another truth trying to escape. Without resistance, he filled the space with his own guilt. Behind the scenes, everything moved steadily forward. Documents were reviewed, timelines aligned, money trails that once seemed buried revealed clear intent. A second life wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, prepared, planned. Marriage wasn't meant to last, it was meant to protect assets long enough for an exit already mapped out. 48 hours is a long time for secrets to sit unattended. The collapse began with a call he didn't expect. Then another. Questions he couldn't charm his way out of. Accounts frozen, access revoked. People he thought were allies suddenly asking for explanations he couldn't provide without exposing himself completely. The other woman vanished the moment pressure arrived, leaving him isolated and exposed. When he finally showed up, there were no raised voices waiting for him, just space. Space filled with facts, space where excuses had nowhere to land. He looked smaller without an audience, stripped of the confidence built on manipulation. The man who once controlled every conversation couldn't control the truth sitting quietly between everyone present. That was the moment it became clear. Nothing needed to be said. Everything had already been revealed. Silence had done what confrontation never could. It allowed him to destroy himself without interference, without sympathy, without distraction. There was no satisfaction in watching it happen, only certainty. Patience had protected what emotion might have damaged. Resistance would have warned him. Silence gave him room to make mistakes freely. As he walked away, defeated by his own secrets, one truth settled deeper than any betrayal ever could. The loudest revenge is letting someone face the consequences they worked so hard to earn. If this story pulled you in, made you pause, or hit a little too close to home, don't forget to like. It helps these stories reach more people who need them. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories where secrets unravel, silence speaks louder than words, and justice arrives right on time. Until the next story, remember, truth always finds its moment.